was a brief about the situation in Yemen, and in this brief, in this report, we have some documents for the first time list all the French-made weapons used in the Yemen war by Saudi coalition. So this was the first time in France they have some information about which arm and French-made weapons are used by the Saudi coalition, because since the start of the war, French government said there are no French arm used in Yemen war against civil, and so they denied. And for the first time, it was her document, the government document, said there are arms used in Yemen war, and they can kill civil. In this document, we have a list with French arms, but they have also arms from UK, from Italy, from Germany, and from United States, and it's also why we have made a partnership with The Intercept on the American arms and weapons in Yemen. And for the first time also, one of the weapons really used by the Saudi coalition was the advisor, French advisor. The name is Canon César. It's an arm on the border between Saudi and Yemen, and it's bombing on Yemen part where civil live. And on the map, in this document, they have some maps where you can see how many people are under the bombing of French arm, and it was 500,000 people. So it was the first time also that the government recognized in this secret document that French arm can be used against civil in Yemen. But these all NGOs say this since long year, but the government said we don't have proof, we don't know about this, and they lie during long time. The French Ministry of Defense, a lot of times on the front of the parliament or on the media, said we don't have any information about the use of French arms in Yemen. So it was false, because these information they have in November and in December, in January, in February. They continue to say that we don't know nothing about this, but all the top of the state of France was allowed by this document, because it was document for the French President Emmanuel Macron, for the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And when we decided to publish, it was a real question, because in France, like in other countries, in UK and in United States, is pretty the same. You can publish military secret documents. So we finally decided to publish this document because it was a public interest document. We put online all the report. We decided because one of these documents don't talk about French military operation. It's not about French secret service, but it's only about commercial issue after you have sold some weapons to Saudi Arabia and Emirates. So we said it don't put in danger some French military on the ground. 1 week after we publish, unfortunately, the same day of the fire of Notre Dame, bad timing for publish revelation like this, but the government was really helpful finally, because 1 week after we publish, they decide after Easter, the weekend Easter, to take investigation against Disclose. They said we have broke the national security of France, so they put investigation. At this moment, we were 3 journalists under investigation, and we were investigated by the anti-terrorist prosecutor. So this was the first time in France they use the new law of terrorist against journalists, because since the terrorist attack in Paris, they have some new law and when you broke the national security, it's a special anti-terrorist prosecutor runs the investigation. So we was interviewed by the DGSI, this is the French service, intelligence service. It's like the French FBI, and we were interviewed about your sources, how we have these documents. We was also interviewed about some private personal life. They asked me about some tweet, like 1 week before I have tweet about Monsanto papers in France, and they asked me why you have tweet about Monsanto papers, or why you have put this on your Facebook. So it was really a personal question and not in links with the case. And this interview was really weird because we was at the head of the intelligence service. They take us in the underground, in the small room where no window, and it was finally, we know after that it was a place when they have terrorists, they question her. So it was pretty weird for a journalist to be here, but finally they have a big buzz about this, but they decide to continue the investigation. They ask another journalist of Disclose for interview, and after we discover, since they launch investigation in November, they have asked at this time 8 journalists are under investigation by French FBI. It's unprecedented in your country. Now they more and more use also in other case for Le Monde about the case of Benalla, a corruption case in France for closer friends of the president. The journalist was also interviewed by the French FBI. We are not used by this kind of process in France, because you have a law really strong to protect journalist sources and journalist secret. But when we were interviewed, they said you are not here like journalist, you are just a citizen, and you have broke national security, so we will be judged not like journalist with protection not source, but like a citizen. And this it's really interesting, because in this time, since we have launched and published some revelation about the French arms in Yemen, never the Ministry of Defense or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs talk about Disclose. When they go in media, they just say some media have published, or wait the Reuters news to say Reuters said some media have published, but never they talk about Disclose. So they try to say Disclose because we are well known, we launch in November, are not a media. And we think it's a new strategy to say that you are not a media, you are not organized. And at this moment, because in France, unfortunately, when you create a media, you need to wait to be recognized by the state like a media. So you need an authorization to say that we are a media, official media. It's a little weird, but it's like this. If you want paid your journalist like journalist and have all the protection for journalists, you need to be recognized by states. At this moment, Disclose is not again recognized, and maybe will be never recognized like a media by the states. So they can use and say this work is not a work of journalists, it's activist work, and they talk like about us like activists, because at the TV the French Ministry of Defense said they broke all the law of the republics. It's maybe a lot of all the law. So it's a huge impact, and also it's a huge impact because they have we have a big solidarity of 47 media in France. Says that this publication, it's public interest documents. So also a lot of NGO like Amnesty International do support to Disclose, and some lower last month write to the prosecutor of Paris, because another things is that the investigation are under the prosecutor of Paris, and for the first time also in your country the prosecutor of Paris was directly designed by the president. Normally it's the Ministry of Justice, and for the first time Emmanuel Macron decided to not follow the ministry, the name proposed by the Ministry of Justice, but decide to give a name for the prosecutor of Paris. And this prosecutor since some months now launched a lot of investigation against media. We every week in these moments we have investigation against media, small media like Disclose, but also really media like Le Monde, like Mediapart. So it's become really difficult to understand what is the strategy of the government actually. This document have a big impact in France, because the Yemen war was not really covered by French media, and work on and investigate on the sale of weapons in France. It's very difficult because all the activities are covered by the military secret. So it was really hard to have testimony, to have documents. So it's the first time we have documents on this topic. And some deputy at the Congress asked for a commission of inquiry, but the government refused and denied the authorization to put parliament investigation on the topic. But they have no real impact in the civil society. They have some demonstration, petition also. Some people ask your deputy about the sale of weapons to Saudi Arabia. So it starts a real debate in France, and this it's a first step, because before there are no debate about what we sold at which country and how. And this it's since 3 months now they have every week's debate about these topics in France, and so we can also say thank you to the DGSI and the FBI service to do a big communication campaign about this story. So anyway, at this time, I think it's become for journalists and for media more and more difficult to investigate on defense topics, and not only in France but in all democratic countries. It's more difficult to investigate on military issue or foreign affairs, but especially in France.
Thank you, Geoffrey. That was a very good overview of the work that you've done. Now, a large part of your reporting as well was not just on the documents, but to sort of carry that forward and add to it, was open source reporting, which Aliaume is going to tell us a little bit more about. And this was really a crucial part to add to the documents and give people more of a visual idea of what the French government's and the Ministry of Defence's involvement was in the arms trade in Yemen and to Saudi Arabia.
It was really interesting because Geoffrey and Disclose had access to secret documents, and again, they aren't talking about weapons, but what we could do using visual, what the New York Times call visual investigation, but what we call open source investigation, is showing. Sorry, I'm just setting up at the same time. Is actually showing where the weapons were, trying to find them on satellite imagery. Trying to find visuals of the weapons taken by people on the ground, because now people have phones on the ground, Saudi Arabian soldiers as well from the National Army. They have their phones, they film, sometimes firing a gun, etc. So that's all open source data we can access, whether it's on social media, on satellite imagery, and how could we use that to complement the secret documents that Geoffrey and his team at Disclose had access to. That was the question that came out as we were doing this investigation. I'm sure there was Christo actually from Bellingcat I saw coming to the CIG. So he talked about the investigation into Skripal, but also Bellingcat got very known for their first investigation into the crash of the MH17 that was shot down in July 2014 by actually this weapon system, which is a Buk missile system, and it was actually on its way to the location where it shot down the MH17. So, and the way Bellingcat worked in order to get that is grab all the visual they could find of the Buk missile system being transported through separatist region in eastern Ukraine and then gelocate it. So it goes from open source tracking big guns, as I was saying, goes from those big weapon system to just guns like this one. That's an investigation we did with Tom Flannery was involved in that one. We did at BBC Africa. He was looking into the murder of 2 young women and 2 young children in the far north of Cameroon. And in order to prove that those doing these killings were Cameroonian soldiers, we had to identify this gun that they're carrying here. It's a Zastava M21. And that's actually really important because it's very rare across Africa, and only the Cameroonian army uses Zastava M21. So that's a screenshot from Facebook that we took, and in the actual video, the soldier, I don't have the screenshot there, but the soldier was also carrying a Zastava M21. So it's really important to ID weapons. But obviously at this stage you might think, okay, IDing weapons is for geek or for people like Dan Bilzerian, you know, that big idiot, egocentric and macho idiot. If you don't know him, it's better. Stay like that. You don't need to know this guy. He's a really big idiot. But I just want to show you and to tell you and expose to this quick presentation that actually you don't need to be a big fan of guns in order to do open source investigation. Actually, it's more or less like a cooking show. And that's how it works when you do open source investigation. So let's start with this cooking show all together, right? So what do we need for a cooking show? We see we need ingredients. Well, it's the same when you track big guns online with open source investigation. You start with visuals. So you need to see visual. You need images, pictures, etc. You need satellite imagery, which is also going to show you visual on big weapon system, on tanks, etc., but also show you where they are in space. And you also, which is quite useful, obviously they travel, so you need to track them. So for that, we're going to use, flight radar system, marine traffic, so we're basically vehicle trackers that enable you, because when weapons get sold to a country, they have to move by boat, they have to move by plane, etc. So there will be that data available online. And so therefore, for the visual, we use social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Periscope, anything that can give you visuals. And people publish all the time online. We do that. When you go in the morning, you take a wonderful cappuccino, you want to show it to your friends, you take a picture of it and you post it on Instagram. Well, some soldiers sometimes just want to show off their big guns to their friends, so they take a picture and upload it to VKontakte or Facebook, and that's how we can find it. It's available to us online, so we need to be able to find that. We need to use satellite imagery. So we got Google Maps, Google Earth, Planet, TerraServer, Wikimapia, Digital Globe, OpenStreet. Those are all the tools we use, all the ingredients we do for our cooking show about tracking big guns. And then we need those tracking software, tracking platform, like marine traffic, vessel finder. This is just a few examples, right? They're not, I didn't put all of them. There's so many online and it keeps changing all the time. But you've got vessel finder and marine traffic for boats, FlightAware, Flight Radar 24, which I'm sure you use when your friends say, or your parents, I'm going to fly in London today. Here's my, flight number, and then you can keep track of them. Well, we can also do the same with military. So with military planes, FlightAware and Flight Radar 24, they don't necessarily have them, but there is that network. I love those people. There is that network of people around the world. It's called ADSB Exchange, and basically they have a little antenna on the top of the house, and they catch every signal that the plane sends. And so whether it's a military or a civil plane, they'll get it and they upload it to the platform. So you can get to the website, because military planes can ask to be deregistered from Flight Radar 24. Anyway, I'm getting into a lot of detail, sorry. But anyway, you've got that, and then don't forget on Twitter or other places, you've got plane spotters, ship spotters, those guys that all they do during their entire life is go out and take pictures of planes and post it and share it with the community. Those are the best people in the world, in my opinion. Right? They're really amazing, fascinating. So why is this important? Because I'm just showing tools and it might make no sense at all. But for us, for this investigation, it is this picture, because in this screenshot of a satellite imagery taken on October 20 and the 18th of October 2018, you actually see 10 Caesar cannons, the cannons Geoffrey was referring to before in his presentation. And those are really important because they are, as we'll show, I'll show you all the steps we undertook in order to get you there, but they are in the port of Jeddah, and this was actually a shipment from France to the port of Jeddah of 10 Caesar cannons. And why again is important? Because those Caesar cannons are used by the Saudi National Army in order to bomb Yemen, where civilian people are, as Geoffrey was saying. And also it's really interesting because that shipment, I think it happened after the date of the document, no? Was it, or when was the date of the document, the secret document? I think it was around the same time. After. And so it was interesting to show that even if France was still, or the French government was still aware that their weapons were potentially used against civil, they will keep on selling weapons to Saudi Arabia because good partnership, they are good friends, you know, they sell oil to France, will sell weapons, it's all good friends. But anyway, that's why it's important. And that's why tracking weapons is important, you know, to show. And that's what's beautiful with open source is you can see it. So the visuals, how did we all start it in order to get to those Caesar cannon on October 2018? Is visual, is first someone tweeting this in February 2018. And this is interesting because on the tweet, you see in the images, you see military equipment, which is actually some of them are French vehicles. So it's very interesting. Let's take a closer look at this image. So we got one with a tower. Interesting, we got nice visual cues as well in that image. And we can link the first image to the second image because we see those two trucks are similar to those two trucks. Therefore, it's nice, we've got two images, they combine together, they give us a nice picture of the location. But even better, so that's a panorama of the entire area that you can build in order to get a better understanding of how it connects. But even better, the guy in the tweet mentioned location. He says it's on the Jeddah Islamic port, which is really useful. I don't speak Arabic, but thank God there is Google Translate, so let's use Google Translate. And so there is Jeddah Islamic being mentioned there. But again, we can't, that's all about the open source. Not because someone claims that it's Jeddah Islamic port, that it's going to be Jeddah Islamic port. So what do? Well, we got Google Earth, so we can verify this. And we got another technique, so yeah, Jeddah Islamic port. First of all, I want to say you can use image reverse search on Google, on Yandex. Yandex is a Russian social media. So all you do is upload the picture to images. So I took a screenshot of the tower because that's a very distinctive feature. And when I put it in Google Image Reverse Search, if you see the result, you see similar towers. And if you click on those links, you'll see that that tower, which is exactly the same as the one above, is actually in Jeddah Islamic port. So that's one way how we can verify the location. But another way is, as I was saying, satellite imagery. We can actually go there without moving from our couch, drinking our coffee, etc. No problem. We just open Google Earth. So that's just like that's what Tom made. He's going to talk about all those crazy visuals after. But we're able to confirm the location by looking at all the details. So on the right, you've got the image, and on the left, the location. So you got the fence, you got the poles, you got those cranes. Is that how you call them in English, I think? Yeah. And then, cool, you got the tower, and it's also in 3D, even better, so you can have full confirmation of the location. So that was interesting because at this stage, just using open source, we could say that this zone, this area that you saw being highlighted at the beginning, is a zone of transit for weapons, potentially coming from France, because there were French weapon systems in there, but maybe other region. Anyway, it's a port of transit in the port of Jeddah. So next step, again, we stick on Google Earth. That's how we stay on Google Earth. That's how it looks, Google Earth. Just going to go to the location. One cool thing about Google Earth is you can go back in time. They've taken many satellite imagery, so you can just, if it moves forward. Okay, please. So again, that's what I did. I would just go to the port of Jeddah. So very sexy zoom. You can do that on Google Earth anytime if you want. So I just fly to the port of Jeddah. I go to the location, which I know I'm going fast, but I've got only 15 minutes, so it goes really fast. But anyway, this takes time. But that's the location. And you can confirm I've got the tower at the top, we just saw it. What's really good in Google Earth is I can go back in time. So I got the little clock at the top. And now that I've identified this as a zone of transit, I can ask myself, what other weapon system I've been transiting? So I can go back in the past. So I'm in 2018. And I keep going through 2018. I can't see the date, but it should be like March, April, sort of towards the end of the year. And as I keep going, boom, interesting. I see those weapon systems which look a little bit different than the other vehicles around it. You have to take me on trust maybe because I don't know if the resolution of the screen is good. But if we zoom on it, you see those guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, are really different from the others, all the other vehicles we've been saying over the satellite imagery. And if we compare, we've got a cabin at the front with a sort of little, sort of the tip of the cannon that comes out. And at the back, we got that big structure at the back. Again, the quality is not so good, but if you look on Google Earth, it's very similar to a Caesar cannon with that big thing at the back where the cannon sits, and the cabin and the tip of the cannon. So that's how we could identify. That's really important because you're looking at obviously satellite imagery and how you transform them into 3D. That's really important. So that's how we were able to confirm that those cannons were Caesar cannons. But if you don't trust me, tomorrow you can go, or even after tonight, you can go to Google Earth. And that's the beauty of open source, is you can go yourself, fly to Google Earth and do it yourself, find the location. I won't tell you where it is. That way you get to find the tweet, everything. And you can do it yourself and identify and confirm that it's indeed a Caesar cannon, that it was pictured by Google Earth satellite imagery, digital globe actually, in the port of Jeddah on October 2018. So that's one step. We're able to identify that Caesar cannons were in the port of Jeddah on the 18th of October 2018. How did they arrive? That's the next question. We're able to see them, but how did they make it to and when did they arrive? Actually, that's the first question before. How they got there is when they got there. Again, satellite imagery, we can go back in the past using different satellite imagery. So for that one, we use digital globe as well, and we're able to say that they arrived between, sorry, I went too fast, but it was between October 13th and October 18th, yeah? I forgot Geoffrey. Fact checking. Between the 8th, okay, so it was between October the 8th, I missed it, and October 13th. So that was really interesting. We're in the port. We know when they arrived thanks to satellite imagery. We know they didn't arrive by plane because we're in the port. They could arrive by trucks, but that seems a bit weird. We know they're being sold from France. We know the type of machinery of weapon system being sold from France to Saudi Arabia. So we know it's in the port, so it must have arrived by boat between the 8th and the 13th or 10th of October, so I keep getting it wrong. But between those dates, anyway, between those dates in October. So we just had to find how did they make them, and that's where tracking system for vehicles is really useful. And interestingly, there had been a New York Times investigation into Italian bombs sold to Yemen, and as part of the investigation, they were showing that the sort of shipping company that were carrying Italian bombs and also other weapon systems to Saudi Arabia was the company named Barry. And so Geoffrey said, well, I'm just going to Google Barry and Jeddah and France, no, actually Barry and France, and see if anything comes up. And it's cool because it was all online. That's in an article that was saying in June 2018 that Barry proudly opened a shipping connection from Le Havre in the north of France to Jeddah. So we can just go then to Vessel Finder, that's the email from them, and say, hey, have you detected any Barry ship between the 8th of October and 30th of October? They say, yes, we did. It's the Barry Shazan, it did arrive on the 12th of October 2018. So that's using all those open source elements, how we're able to track a shipment of Canon Caesar, to spot it on satellite imagery, find how it made it, and then prove that it was coming from France and it was being carried by this Barry shipping company. And all of that is just open source. You can just do that from your laptop, from home. You don't need to go on the ground. It's helpful to work with journalists actually with that, because then you can compare information and verify. But all of this, you can do that from the comfort of your home. So it's beautiful, even better. But yeah, and that's how we're able to prove this shipping, as I was saying, from Riyadh to Jeddah, and to show that indeed the French government will keep on selling Caesar cannons to the Saudis, even though they knew those were being used to bomb civilian zones in Yemen.
Now, Tom worked on on the video aspect of that, which was so crucial to people really finding out what the whole story was about. As we know, particularly as a print journalist myself, and who writes long form, I'd love to think that everybody reads the 4,500 word articles that I write. But most of the time, people won't get beyond the first 500 words. They'll be very lucky if they read a full 1,000. And so a lot of this comes down to the great videos that Tom has done, not just on these documents, is snapping that into a 6-minute video that's going to get shared widely on social media, that is going to summarise the whole story and hopefully draw some of those people into reading the actual reporting and looking at the documents. So I was hoping, Tom, you could explain a little bit more about the work that you did on this, and also how you guys all work together, because this is the first time they've all been together. And so Geoffrey is based in Paris, Tom is based in Wales, Aliaume is based here in London. And so just from a trust perspective, a security perspective, and how challenging it is to kind of put all that, your work, the work that you've all done together in a video when it's very much documents-led as well. Yeah, it's just...
Thanks, Iona. Like Iona says, I'm very aware that you haven't come here to listen to me talk like a geek about making videos. It's mostly that this man's a wanted man in France, and that's why you're all here, and this is just a detour. But I think Iona's right about the way in which we worked is really interesting. The process of making the video like that is Aliaume's just done such a wonderful job of visually explaining how an investigation like that's made, and in essence, making a video production of that is just going inside Aliaume or Geoffrey's head and just trying to imagine that someone doesn't know anything about any of this stuff. So you're just taking nothing as a given, and it's always good, I guess. I'm not a journalist, so maybe it's good to be able to take a step back and say, I don't know what any of this means, or put my hand up and say, I don't know where that country is. Not Yemen, but it can happen. All those things are kind of helpful to have someone, I guess, on your team that doesn't know what they're talking about. So that's basically what we're doing is with work of the quality of these guys. I guess I'm just taking what Aliaume's shown you and they're trying to add a layer of maybe professionalism or intrigue to it. But you can see how visual it is already. So the work really lends itself to being shown in a film format or an interactive format. It's worth mentioning that there's a massive investigation here, and most of it was done by Geoffrey and other people, and it was presented on the internet as an interactive. So it was a massive long form interactive that had video throughout it. It lends itself so visually. And what's really interesting, I was going to show you some things that Aliaume's touched on with Google Earth. So you can see that the tools are out there. They're free, mostly free. The data sets are out there. A lot of them you can access open. And then in terms of the filmmaking, you can definitely find free tools to do this. You can find them on the internet. A lot of that was done not on a free tool in terms of the video production. It was done using Adobe package, but for students that's £15 a month, and you can do a lot in a month. And that gives you everything. That gives you all of their things, Photoshop, stuff for editing photos and videos and doing sound. It's an entire professional thing that, everyone uses in the industry. So for £15 a month, that's pretty good. And the college can probably help with that as well. So that's the tools, but you really can not use that tool. And you can see by Aliaume's work that Aliaume's just often using Google Slides or Keynote or something like that and just using the shapes. If you've got a screen capture software and you're prepared to take the time to really finesse those visuals, as a journalist, you can start actually telling these stories visually. Just get the screen capturing software out, record, and then a massive component of it is a script, obviously. And it's been really interesting working with these guys at the BBC because so much of it happens in the script. And it's such a wonderful place where journalists, and writers and video makers, filmmakers all meet and can talk about ideas. It's a great thing. What was interesting about this is I don't speak French, and this was all in French. So I text my friend who speaks French at the beginning and said, I don't speak French, can you be my buddy on hand if I don't understand some of this? But it just goes to show that the script on these open source things needs to be so precise that actually sometimes language doesn't really come into the kind of level of detail, because as long as someone is bridging the gap with the language, in this case these guys, the visuals are so closely tied with very precise script notes or voiceover that often, as long as as long as someone's checking it, who really does know their languages, then it's actually you can do a hell of a lot across languages. So I guess that leads on to what you were saying about how we worked, and that's been beautiful. It's been really beautiful working with these open source guys, because so much of it's remote, and I'd never met Geoffrey, and I'd never had a meeting with Disclose, and they put a lot of trust in me through Aliaume, who I had met once, and they're handing over secret documents to me from the French. This is where it gets very interesting, because obviously Aliaume is our link person, and the trust is obviously implicit between both parties. But you can see how interesting it gets when you're working across different countries and you never meet, but you're talking about top secret things. What's really another thing that's really interesting is the overlap between what Aliaume's doing in Google Earth is huge with what I'm doing in Google Earth. We're using the same tool to do the work, and so we're often on Skype in a virtual 3D space, talking as if we're there. Having these very, very detailed conversations. Oh no, move it a little bit to the right, turn to your right, look over your shoulder, there's a mountain there, So it becomes kind of bizarre, because you've probably been following a lot of the guff that comes out about virtual reality and how it's going to transform our lives. And I don't know if you saw Mark Zuckerberg walking through a disaster zone with his selfie stick, being like, this is going to be the future. And everyone was like, oh, it's not a future I want to live in. But there is a really hopeful story, because when you push all the bullshit aside, there's stuff. If you actually look at where interesting things have been done, it's actually really kind of what are considered lo-fi tools now, like Google Earth. Even though it's state of the art in how it's made, it's used by everyone. And it's really lo-fi tools with something like Skype, which is really, run of the mill, everyone uses it. And then suddenly you really feel like you are in a virtual space doing something worthwhile with people that, you form a friendship with. And that's probably what virtual reality and remote working is going to look like, and not some of this sort of bullshit sitting around a faux table having a presentation and that kind of thing. That's just, nobody wants to do that. So that's been a real joy. So I think there's going to be a lot more of that. And I don't want to take up too much more of your time, because if you're interested in the video production side of it, please just ask a question in a minute, and I can just totally geek you out about that. But I will just say that it is a really hopeful time, actually, for me, because until I started working with these guys on open source stuff, I'd become very disillusioned about journalism, because I'm not a journalist like most people. But after working with these guys for about 18 months, 2 years now, it's very, very hopeful to me, the situation, because when you think about how some of these guys are talking, world leaders, it's basically, you really get the feeling that they don't trust anybody. And if you're someone who's very interested in amassing power, you can totally understand how, if you're that way inclined, you'll trust less and less people. And that's the one thing that we've got that they don't and never will have, is that you can trust people and wonderful things happen. And I think this project's definitely an example of that. It could have happened, but it would have happened in a different way. And maybe there's a little bit less risk that I wasn't in France, so I'm not under the, I'm not under the same pressure that Geoffrey is. But that's the one thing we've got. We can trust people. and they're never going to have that, and that's a really, really lovely thing. So that's the hopeful message, the cheesy hopeful message I'd like to leave on.